You don't remember me, do you? The voice startled her. She was just taking a seat near the back of the ceremony, away from the stage, away from the uniforms and medals and speeches. Her black dress was simple, unremarkable. She looked up, eyes squinting against the sun, and there he stood. A tall man in full military dress, decorated chest, powerful stance, staring at her like she was the most important person in the world. No, I'm sorry, she said quietly. Should I? The man's face softened, and his voice dropped to something almost reverent. You were the nurse. In Fallujah. You saved my brother's life. And just like that, everything around her, the folding chairs, the podium, the crowd, melted into silence. She hadn't planned on being noticed. In fact, she hadn't planned on being there at all. For years, she'd skipped these kinds of events. Too many faces she couldn't forget. Too many names she'd written on charts that never got discharged. But this time, an old friend convinced her to come. Just to pay respects, they said. So she came quietly, with her hair pinned back and her hands gripping a small silver locket, the one that still held her army ID photo, long faded and creased. The ceremony began like any other. Officers marched sharply, names were read, applause came in soft waves. A general took the stage, tall and commanding, voice echoing through the park. He spoke with practiced honor, mentioning bravery, sacrifice, and the weight of duty. People nodded, some wept. Most didn't notice the woman seated quietly in row 7, her eyes distant but dry. Until he stopped speaking. Mid-sentence, the general froze. His gaze shifted from the audience to somewhere in the crowd, and a strange silence began to ripple outward. People turned their heads. Was something wrong? Was someone being disruptive? But no, it was the general himself. He slowly stepped back from the microphone, ignoring every protocol, every script, and began walking down the steps. His aides panicked, unsure what to do. Veterans and civilians alike watched in stunned confusion as the general marched straight toward the back row. And stopped in front of her. Lieutenant Margot Ellis, he said, loud enough for all nearby to hear. You saved my brother. She blinked again. I didn't know, she whispered. He didn't make it, did he? The general shook his head. But because of you, he got to call my mom. Got to say goodbye. He lasted long enough to leave a voicemail we still listen to every year. She looked down, overwhelmed. I was just doing my job, she said, but he took a step back, stood at attention, and delivered a full formal salute right there in front of everyone. It was perfect, shoulder square, palm precise, filled with meaning. She gasped, her hand trembled. But she returned it slower, with the same weight. The crowd around them began to rise. Applause built. Not wild, not chaotic, but reverent. Real. A nurse in a black dress and a general with 1,000 eyes on him, saluting across the years. What they didn't know was her backstory. Margot Ellis had never wanted to wear a uniform, not until her brother, her best friend, was killed during a convoy ambush in 2003. She joined 6 months later, not to fight, but to heal. She became a combat nurse, volunteering for back-to-back deployments. She wasn't flashy, she didn't post photos, but she saved lives in conditions that broke even the strongest men. Sand in her teeth, blood on her boots, IVs held up with rifle slings. She was the last line between life and death on too many nights. She remembered none of the names, but every scream, every heartbeat, every last breath whispered in her lap. When she came home, she never wore the uniform again. She folded it away in a closet, worked in local clinics, taught CPR at the community center, and carried on like her service had ended. But inside, it never had. The pain, the loss, the guilt, all of it stayed buried, until that day when someone reminded her what it all meant. After the salute, people approached her like she was a monument. Soldiers old and young shook her hand. One young man said his brother was one of hers. A little girl asked if she was a doctor. No, Margot said gently, I was a nurse. But that little girl looked up with bright eyes and said, You're a hero. That night, long after the chairs had been folded away and the flags lowered, Margot sat at home, staring at her old ID. She looked so young in that photo, so hopeful, and now she felt seen for the first time. not as just a nurse, but as someone who held the line between chaos and mercy. Before we end this story, let us know in the comment, where are you watching from? So some warriors carry rifles, others carry bandages, hope and steady hands in a storm. The battlefield has many uniforms, and the ones with the softest voices often carry the deepest strength. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel and hit that like button and drop a comment below.